Hey, what's good, fam? Welcome to another episode of the Feed Me, Fuel Me podcast. Durs and Jeff coming to you live from Scottsdale with body image specialist Dr. Morgan Francis. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah. You spoke at the Emerald?
I spoke at the Emerald not too long ago. I've spoke at the Powerhouse Women's event in 2018 as one of the main speakers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One of my coaches was in attendance at the Emerald, and she comes back and she's like, "Oh my God, I just heard the most amazing woman present. You've got to have her on your podcast." And so I stalked you on social media because
the normal thing to do.
We can do that now and find out everything I need to know about you and your latest 6 posts on Instagram. You know, the body image thing. Jeff and I both come from bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And so the dysmorphia thing we're very aware of, but you work with both men and women, but I feel like your message is more catered toward a female population. But let's backtrack. How did you find your mission and your passion for counseling?
Well, I grew up in Ohio, so I grew up in a very secure home. I was one of 3 kids, and, you know, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad worked, and my needs were met. And then in 1996, when I was 16 years old, my brother was killed in a car crash.
Damn, sorry to hear that.
Thank you. And we were very close. We were only 4 years apart. And so, you know, when you lose a sibling and when you lose a child, I mean, life completely is different. So there's loss, and then there's post-loss. And so having seen my parents go through a roller coaster of emotions, and my sister and I both going on our own journey with our grief, you know, really taught me a lot about life and how I want to live my life. And so right away after he had passed, I was put into grief counseling. And it wasn't so much talk therapy as it was, you know, journaling and art therapy and music and photography. Music is a big healing for me. I really respond to lyrics and sound. And I traveled, and I just got to know myself really, really well. And I healed, but I also didn't, and I became a really good avoider of pain. And so I made poor decisions with relationships and got into toxic relationships, or, you know, abused drugs or alcohol, and I developed an eating disorder. And although, you know, there was a body image component there, my eating disorder really got worse when I was in college. And so my parents basically gave me an ultimatum. They said, you either go get help or we'll take you out of school. And education was everything to me. Because even though I was going through so much turmoil in my personal life, I could show up and I could study and I could do really well. So I knew education was power, and it was going to provide a life for me. So I couldn't let that go. And so I went and got help. Again, I went back into treatment, and I focused on you know, eating disorder recovery. And then I got out and I pursued my doctorate. And then when I moved out here to Arizona, that's when, you know, the whole body image really, you know, took off for me to really dive into it. So I knew that my calling was to serve others. My purpose here was to heal other people's pain, just like I had gone through my own pain.
Tell us about that transition from the Midwest out to Scottsdale.
It was different.
You said the body image thing kind of hit you in the face.
It
when
really
you got
did.
Here. Yeah.
I first went to 24 Hour Fitness. It's where I first went to go work out. And I, you know, had baggy pants on and a big T-shirt, no makeup on, probably had a scrunchie in my hair, backpack.
In there just to do work.
Just to sweat it out, right? And I looked around me, and I was the only girl that had pretty much clothing on. There were a lot of women who looked beautiful and had their hair down or makeup on, or had their designer purses. And I was like, where am I? And that's when I knew that I was in a totally different, area, just as far as body image went. And so my dissertation for my doctoral degree was on cosmetic surgery and body image and self-concept. And so I was able to do it out of Lifetime Fitness. Baram Akradi is one of our friends. So he let me run the study out of there, and it was really great. I had people come in and they took a survey, and I asked them whether or not they had undergone cosmetic surgery, what types of surgery, and then they basically evaluated whether or not they felt better after the surgery, and if their quality of life improved, their self-concept, their, who they are as a person, and did their the dissatisfaction with their body, did it improve?
What'd you find?
Well, what do you guys think?
I'm gonna say no.
What do you say?
I'll go with it. No.
I feel like it's a temporary fix.
Yeah.
Yes. So it did not improve their level of dissatisfaction with their parts of their body. And honestly, I was not prepared for that outcome.
Really?
Well, because all the literature review out there says that how much, cosmetic surgery can enhance your life, right? Can enhance the way you think and feel about your body.
That's what the literature says.
Oh yeah, there's tons of studies out there that support cosmetic surgery.
What are the? I'm all about research. What's the how long are those studies?
Well, I don't know right now because this was back in.
Sorry, but yeah, are they long term?
Yes, they were long term.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So they were empirically researched studies within the last 5 years of when I did my dissertation.
Sure. Yeah.
I had 2 chairs, so I had really sticklers as far as research went.
Yeah.
And so we weren't prepared for with how to rebuttal this. What do we say?
That blows my mind.
So, but what we found was that the baseline for where people's level of dissatisfaction might have been different. So let's say someone who's really struggling with insecurity about the size or shape of their breasts, they may really be down low when it comes to their dissatisfaction. And now that they've had surgery, they might now meet somebody at their level who has not had surgery. If that makes sense.
Sure. Right.
And then there's many facets that go into, it might have been just the relationship with their surgeon didn't go well, and that's why they're dissatisfied. Or maybe it was because I interviewed them months after their surgery and other life events have taken place. So different factors could have gone into it, but still, it was a strong finding. And so I'm kicking myself because back then, I was asked to present it at different conferences and to publish it. I was so burnt out from, this dissertation. I mean, it was like giving birth to a child. It took everything out of me. So I really wanted nothing to do with it.
We know nothing about that.
Yes. So I just let it go. But now I wish I could go back and publish it, but it is what it is.
Is it too late?
I think so. I mean, it's an older study.
It's outdated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so many.
Do you think the findings would be the same if you redid it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do I want to ask this question? You've been actively practicing for 12 years.
Yeah.
And before we went live on the mic, I asked you, has the level of insecurity or the issues that you're dealing with across the board in your clientele changed with the prevalence of social media?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's way more prevalent, and we're seeing it younger and younger.
Sure.
I see a lot of junior high or high school individuals that'll come in that are struggling with their appearance and feeling self-conscious and just not being able to have the social skills to manage it because everything's isolated and on the phone. So they'll move schools multiple times, and then pursue online schooling, stay home, and really struggle with the way that they think and feel about their bodies.
Do you think, if it's becoming more and more prevalent in adolescence, I would just assume that that's minus the technology piece, that's just part of being an adolescent, right? Just being insecure in general.
I would think so. I mean, I don't know I was insecure growing up. I mean, I think we all were, right? So it's like a rite of passage.
Right.
The difference is that as I think parents, adults have a hard time seeing their children in pain.
Okay.
Because, we've seen really destructive, traumatic things happen when children have been in pain,
Right.
whether it's, something on the news, right? So we're so afraid of all the bullying and the destruction of, school shootings that can happen. So I think right now we parent a lot of times out of fear rather than grace.
Okay.
And so as parents, I think a lot of parents struggle with how to handle it, what to do. And they try and some really try, some maybe don't even know what's going on with their children.
Right.
And so there's really like this disconnect. And so then the child ended up coming into my office, and oftentimes I'm working with the parent and child. It may not be that, the parent has identified the child as the identified patient, but that may not be who I see as the identified patient.
Right. Yeah.
So, oftentimes we'll bring the parent in and do, sessions around communication and just really help to build a hierarchy of coping skills for the child and for the parent.
Can you walk us through the difference between, like, in terms of what it looks like to parent with fear versus grace?
Well, fear is, it can be, fight, flight, or freeze, right? So we can fight back, or we can freeze and not know what to do. So we do nothing, and it's paralysis analysis. So we just, stay stuck. And then, flight is just, I got to avoid. I just stick my head in the sand and I don't want to talk about it. We're not talking about this tonight. We'll often see that many times too. Well, parents don't know what to do. And so, nothing gets done because they avoid it over and over. And so, there's different many levels where I think parenting with grace is learning how to tolerate the distress that your child is in, because it's not comfortable, right? If my kid falls down and hurts and scrapes their knee, I can get a Band-Aid and eventually the bleeding will stop. But when an emotional wound happens, it's so complex and there's different layers and it can involve different people. And there's lots of politics that can happen, obviously, at a school setting. So it's really difficult. And also the child may not feel comfortable talking about it. And they may feel shamed or embarrassed or humiliated if they're getting teased for something that, way that their skin looks, or maybe their ears are misshaped, or I don't know. It could be anything nowadays, I feel like. So it's not even maybe something really obvious. It can be something so subtle that kids get, teased for and really picked on.
I know you do a lot with the body image portion of it with kids, but have you seen sort of a correlation between like kids at a younger age reaching financial success a lot earlier? Like you see 12-year, because I came from a gaming conference just a few weeks or like last week.
I saw that.
And these kids, they're making millions of dollars at the age of 13 years old. And you see kids looking up to these guys as idols, and they're the same age or even younger. So have you seen a correlation between like body image and also like financial success at an early age, where kids compare themselves like, I need to achieve more and more because this YouTube personality or this gamer, for instance, is financially capable at the same age I am, for instance?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't see it so much, but what I refer to that is the dopamine rush.
Okay.
So when you have a child whose brain is still developing, receive tons of praise and accolades, whether it's through success or financial wealth or overall just stimulation to the brain, there's like this dopamine rush that happens, and that's not good for any person, let alone a child, especially before the age of 25, because our brain is still developing. And so really what we want to have happen is a dopamine drip. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter that's responsible for pleasure. Okay. So it's the feel good, right? So we constantly get it through, stimulation, through hugging, through touch, through exercise, through food. We can get it through what we see on TV. So we get it all day long. But when a child is then, making, millions of dollars in a quick amount, and then there's kids that are, constantly comparing themselves to other people. I mean, we do that as an adult, but think about it as a child, right? You want to be like who you see on YouTube. It's really, I think, very confusing for a child to make sense of. And they don't have the wherewithal to really know how to think that way.
Right. Yeah. Because you see a lot, like you mentioned, the social media age. We didn't grow up at an age where you could consume all this data, whether it's factual or whether it's fake,
right?
And you really don't know how to process that. And kids nowadays, they're scrolling through their feeds, and it's a comparison contest. Like, man, I feel like I'm not good enough, you know. And that has to be a difficult time to grow up in.
It's really difficult. I can't imagine. Man, I know how many issues, just general stuff that you go through. But now add a phone and social media and constant access to knowing what all your friends are doing, and if you're left out, and you're not included.
FOMO. Yeah. Is that a clinical diagnosis?
Yes.
Fear of missing out.
Yes. Yeah.
That's so crazy.
It's interesting. Crazy.
Because it is just that readily accessible comparison. When it was just landlines and barely getting to the internet, you would just go to sleep and wake up to the news.
Right.
You know, now you can wake up in the middle of the night and catch up.
Yeah. And I feel like you had to be committed to your word. You know, when we grew up, if you knew you were going to meet your neighbor out, sneak out and go do some trouble in the neighborhood, like you had to commit to your word. Okay, you know, I'll meet you at, 10 o'clock tonight,
Right.
and so you had to be there. Nowadays, you don't have that same, there's that commitment to your word and that loyalty isn't as
Concrete.
Yeah. And so that's what I see kids missing out on too, because it's very flippant. They don't care as much. And so helping them to be more impeccable and with their purpose and their word is something I think needs to be coached.
Are you a fan, just being impeccable with your word? Are you a fan of the 4 agreements?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that like, do you have required reading, if you will?
Yes. I mean, not everyone has time to read. I mean, sometimes if I'm working with, an adult male and he's an entrepreneur or he's a lawyer or a doctor or surgeon, they don't have time to sit and read, but they'll listen to a podcast.
Oh, sure.
So definitely, recommending podcasts or TED Talks, which are, quicker with getting the material out to them in a succinct manner. Brene Brown is definitely one of my favorites that I tend to recommend.
Really good.
I think it helps too for men to understand the context of shame and vulnerability, because obviously it's very different gender based.
Sure.
So Brene Brown is typically something that a resource that I've used to help men understand around vulnerability, and it's not weakness. It doesn't mean that
good job.
she does a very good job with that. So that's typically what I go to.
So how is it different from a clinical standpoint, the body image thing for men and women?
Well, for women, we're, judged on our appearance and our external, what we look like, right? And that beauty myth and that beauty ideal changes over time. We know from, history that it's completely changed all the way from the Victorian era to now. And it's a way to keep women oppressed and small. And, I can go on and on about that. But for men, it shows up in their, their physical appearance, their masculinity, their financial wealth and success. And also with sex. And so a lot of times men learn their masculinity through pornography because they're exposed to pornography at such a young age, and younger. So we're seeing erectile dysfunction happening much younger age for men. Years ago it was in their 40s, when men were aging, and we would normalize that, right? Nowadays we're seeing as young as 18.
Good Lord.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, 18.
That's terrifying.
What is it about the pornography that's making it age down it's like a huge number? Like, what is it that drew men to get that ED, I guess, so to speak?
Because it's available. Because it's available on your phone and you can find it. And there's, curiosity can lead us anywhere. So, I see something and it's physiologically arousing to the person's brain. And so it leaves an imprint. And so again, like the dopamine gets excited. And so we want to keep searching and then you keep looking until the novelty wears off, and then you'll go to something even more and something more. And then it just keeps expanding and expanding. And you give someone that's compulsive with looking at pornography, then you'll see rapid changes in their mood, their attention, their focus, their interpersonal relationships. They'll stop, participating in sports. They'll isolate themselves more. They'll withdraw. They might use more drugs and alcohol. It'll impact their reality because the pornography is way more exciting than having something in reality. And what is really concerning is with virtual reality porn. So that's going to be a whole tsunami that comes out because it's already happening.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is it's causing more and more problems for, emotional and sexual intimacy, because why would I go meet somebody out at a bar or a club where I can face rejection, or I can just
get instant gratification?
Yes.
So what's your insight on this? You may know, like have you heard of that no fap movement is what they call it, where guys basically, it's abstinence from masturbation. Is that what it is?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes, I do.
What's your thought on that? And like, is that a cure from like I guess your standpoint, because you see it on like the YouTube, and it's like sort of a trending topic in a sense, where guys are abiding by this law. But what's your viewpoint on it from a professional standpoint?
Well, it depends upon the person. There's different schools of thought around that. So I think the main thing is, if you are struggling with pornography and compulsive masturbation, to work with a certified sex addiction therapist. And don't just think you can just figure this out on your own. Because you may just stop watching porn, but then all the rest of the interpersonal problems are still there. So yes, there's been recommendations to completely stop masturbating. There's been other therapists who've said, no, that's not realistic. It's like looking at drugs and alcohol, do you completely stop, using drugs and alcohol, or is there harm reduction? And I think I've heard different schools of thought, so I don't want to say one way is better than the other.
Right.
I think it's just important to work with a certified sex addiction therapist to help treat you.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, because I'd rather hear it from, somebody like yourself with credential behind them than just like the YouTube guru who says this works. And it's like, what kind of certification do you have? So it's a super interesting perspective. Yeah, it's like, I think the connection, we talk about it a lot. The connection that we have in this world has created a lot of lack of connection because everything is, I can have it now, I can do this now. You can be a millionaire tomorrow, right? And so people are missing the thread in between of like going through those processes.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a very good point about, why would I go to the bar where I can face rejection, right? Where, that's not even part of the process if I just stay at home and do the thing on my phone.
And it's just all about power. Yeah. Because I can control what I see. I can control what I don't want to see.
Right.
I can choose which woman I'm going to look at or what episode or whatever it is. So it's really about power.
Okay.
And so really what we're seeing is someone who's felt powerless in a real life situation where they were, insecure or they were rejected or they felt, just, uncomfortable. Yeah. And then it feels safer for them to be in their home isolated, in front of a screen.
Is a lot of the body image stuff resultant of what someone would interpret as a significant rejection?
It can be, yes,
Okay.
or it can be something that they were exposed to at an early age. Like say it was a same-sex experience and something happened. It doesn't mean that you're gay, and I think that's a misconception. It just means that there was a same-sex experience that you were exposed to, and so that can affect the way that you think and feel about your body.
Okay.
And so it's just it's so multifaceted, and I think it's really important for a provider who, like myself, who specializes in body image specifically when I'm working with a man, is to understand their sexual health. And so, part of my initial interview is to understand, okay, what's bringing you here, and what's the background around this? How did this? What's the etiology? Where did this come from?
Right.
It's not maybe just about your relationship with food, which I think a lot of times we just think it's very simplistic. Oh, just eat better.
Right.
It's not just eat better. You can, I know plenty of people that have followed diets and programs and they're still left feeling like they're not good enough.
Right.
It's about understanding what got you, what happened for you to, question your self-worth and think that you're not deserving of compassion and love and nurturance and guidance. And so there's trauma there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So how far down that rabbit hole do you typically have to go? Because, living in the fitness space, as we were talking about before we got on, you have to develop a significant amount of rapport with somebody, in my experience, before they're comfortable even getting into that conversation. We're here to get in shape and become healthier and do all that kind of stuff. But why are you here?
Yeah.
And going back to the body image thing, some of that stuff is so cemented in the subconscious at that point that they don't even know, and it's been there for so long, they don't even know what the trigger was. So like, I don't want to say typically because nothing's typical, but in your practice, like how long does it take to really identify the root cause?
The first session. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Right on.
I mean, I just know what to ask. I know what to look for. Today I worked with a 65-year-old man, and he came in because he referred to me because, he feels he's fat and he's overweight. And I was like, well, tell me what's going on in your life and tell me about your food. And he kind of walked me through it. And I was like, okay, well, tell me about, your wife. And then next thing I know, we're talking all about this grief and loss. Right. And he had, a father that was, not affectionate, non-demonstrative, meaning he wasn't, physically affectionate. His mom was busy raising all the boys in the household. And, clearly he never knew how to speak about his emotions, never knew how to talk about his emotions, and his wife had her own trauma. And so there's tons of loss and tons of grief and tons of suffering that he never had the language to be able to communicate what was going on for him. So it shows up in his relationship with food, because it's a great distraction from feeling pain, eating.
Sure.
Right? I feel good when I eat.
Right.
So, doing that, motion of, the food to the mouth is a great way to escape and avoid my pain. And so we'll see a lot of binge eating at night. Typically people do great, like during the day, right? Like, oh, it was so good until I got home. Well, what happened when you got home? Well, I wasn't distracted from my work or from, whatever I was doing. And then I'm left with my emotions, and then I have stuff in the cupboard, and then it's just like a free for all.
Yeah.
And these are educated people. These aren't, these are
Right.
successful, educated, bright individuals that, will come in to see me, but yet they're so struggling, and there's so much shame around it.
Sure.
Because they don't feel like they can talk about it, because maybe, they might be a fitness competitor, or they might be a bodybuilder, and everyone's praising the way that they look, and there's like this deep, dark secret of what happens when they're by themselves at home.
How does body image and identity come together?
Well, it all goes into your pod of your self-concept. So your self-concept is who you are, how you see yourself. And so what happens, and how I explain it to people, is that, our self-concept develops when we're a child and through our adolescence, right? And there's all these ingredients that go into your stew of your self-concepts: your morals, your values, your social connections, your competency, your physical appearance, your academia or your career. And so all the ingredients come in, and if it's a good pot, then we have, pretty much equal amounts of each ingredient. But what happens is that typically we'll see like our physical appearance be one of the more strong ingredients that gets put into the self-concept stew. And so when that happens, then there becomes disruptions in the way that we think and feel about ourselves with relationship to our bodies. So we're constantly searching for that external validation, right? And so self-esteem is external based. So how well do I perform in my sport? How well do I do on my test? How much money am I making? What do I look like? That's all externally based. And so typically if I don't like the way that I look, I'm not going to like who I am, because that's self-esteem.
Okay.
Right? So it's a positive correlation. As one goes down, the other one goes down. But if I like the way that I look, I'm going to like who I am, even though like hell could be going on in my life. Right?
Right.
But if I look good, no one's going to know any different, because we're all going to assume, we make the assumption that if you look good and you're thin or you're fit or you're muscular or then you must be doing so well in life. Well, I can tell you right now, like some of the most thin, fit people I work with are the most miserable.
Yeah.
And I know when I was at my thinnest, I was the most miserable.
Okay.
Have you seen a big cultural difference between where people have these psychological issues, like for instance, like the Indian or Asian culture, where they put heavy emphasis on education, being a doctor, so on, instead of like body image? Have you seen like cultural differences where Americans worry about more like body image? I'm just being general, and like somebody from like an India or Asia worrying more about the educational differences or achievements?
Yes, but what I see mostly is, how do I say this that I don't come off sounding insensitive? I see most of the women on social media tend to be thin white women selling a product.
Okay.
Like, buy this product and you can have a body like mine, or do this program, or don't eat for 7 days and you can look like me. I think there's a book that's out right now about, our fear of being fat is really our fear of having a body like a black female.
Like a Serena Williams, for instance.
Yes.
Like real strong, muscular.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I wish I could remember the name of the title of the book, because it's not coming across my mind right now. But really, it's this rejection of the black body.
Really?
Interesting.
Yeah, I haven't gotten the book, but
Okay.
it's in my queue
Yeah.
to read, because I need to educate myself about it still
Sure.
too. Like I'm
Yeah.
still learning, and so I
Okay.
think obviously being a provider, like I need to like challenge my own cultural views or my
Sure.
stereotypes, or what is this about, and help me understand more and get educated and ask questions. As a white female, I have white privilege, I have pretty privilege, I have thin privilege. There's definitely things that I've been
Yeah.
able to get in my life because of the way that I look, which is not right.
Sure.
So I think it's important for me to also make sure everyone knows, like, I have privilege.
Sure. Well, one of the things that we've talked about, since transitioning from bodybuilding, which is very aesthetic based, to CrossFit, which is very performance based, the cultural acceptance in this community of the strong, muscular female. Like in our community, CrossFit, it's been embraced and celebrated to be a woman with muscles and be able to perform, and in a lot of cases outperform men. And it's been a very empowering movement, in my opinion, having seen what I've seen in sport and in fitness over the last 20 years. But I think that it also, being black athlete, those two things independent of each other and in combination, it's also celebrated that breeder mentality, you know, that aesthetic is healthy, you know, from a, not, what's the word? Just from a very primal state, you know what I mean? Like, she is fit to bear children, you know what I mean?
Evolutionary standpoint.
That's it, from an evolutionary standpoint. Thank you, sir.
That's why you guys work well together.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, there's lots of things that come through with, you know, our ethnicity, our culture, our sport, our fitness. And yeah, there's definitely different types of movements that are happening. I just love seeing individuals embrace their shape or size.
Sure.
Whatever it is, and not use fear or not use deprivation or not use this master slave complex. Like, oh no, my body is going to perform. Oh no, I'm going to make my body do this. When, you know, honoring the rest, honoring the pause. Yeah. I see that happen often. Like, you know, people spend hours upon hours upon hours in the gym and then get really frustrated or upset when their bodies aren't looking a certain way or performing a certain way. And there's just this really tough discipline about it, but it's not even discipline to me. It's just like this control and this fear of power, not having control.
I've never heard it described in that way, the master slave mentality with regards to what you want to make your body do versus what your body is actually capable of.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because I think we're all capable of doing amazing things with our bodies. I mean, I did Ironmans, like I get it. And it was an amazing time in my life. And at the same time, it's finding that, okay, when is it okay? Like, when can I give myself the permission to just pause or take a moment to rest? Because we all know, like, refueling our bodies and resting our bodies, we typically get the best results.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, even Amanda, a couple of weeks ago, Amanda Goolsby talked about her life. She was a bikini competitor. Yeah. Had a traumatic accident and that took her out of the game. And she describes it as when she let that identity go, her life got better. Yeah. She doesn't, quote unquote, look as good as she used to, you know, like from a stage ready standpoint, but her overall like mental, physical well-being is so much better because she's not reliant upon that external validation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So she has compassion for herself. So the work that she did is from the inside out, not the outside in. Yes. And that's what body image is all about.
So how do you get somebody to take that first step into the deep work? Because we obviously all play in that space, and it's to the point that it's so much a part of us that we enjoy doing it, right? Asking those deep questions, finding the answers, asking more questions. Like, how do you get somebody to take that first step?
I think, you know, whether it's from someone saying, like, giving them the permission to ask for help or allow themselves to get help, or they do it for themselves. Like, many people will come in and they're just so unhappy. And they've tried every program. They've done everything. And nothing is working. They're not seeing the changes maybe on the outside. And then typically I start to help them and educate them about, well, let's look at what's going on the inside. You know, talk to me about, you know, how do I know when you're upset? Like, how would I see when you're sad or frustrated? And how do you cope with that? What is your hierarchy of coping skills? You know, what do you say to yourself on a daily basis? Would you talk that way to a friend? You know, and oftentimes the answer is no. Well, why wouldn't you? Because it would be cruel and mean. And yet you say those things to yourself. So helping them to shift and becoming more aware. I think, you know, making the invisible and creating visibility of the awareness is really a critical step. And so, yeah, there's just lots of steps that I help them try to do and really just be a place where I'm working in the feeling and the dealing and the healing with them.
I like that. From a sort of a tactical standpoint, what's a good question to start asking yourself if you're in that state? Like, they're not ready to come see you yet. They're not comfortable. But, like, what's a good question they can start asking themselves to start uncovering those layers, for instance?
That's a great question. I think going back to, would you talk the way to yourself? Would you talk to a friend that way? Would you talk that way to a loved one? And if you're saying, no, I would never say this to my child, or I would never say this to a friend of mine, then that's where the change and the shift needs to happen. Okay. The number one question I get asked is typically, how do I make sure that my child doesn't hate his or her body? It's like the number one question I get asked. And the answer always is, well, it's you. you are going to be the person that your child looks up to. Children learn through social modeling, monkey see, monkey do. So if you're stepping on a scale, if you're constantly on a diet, or if you are, no, mommy or daddy can't eat that, but you can have the pizza, or you can have the ice cream, or you can have whatever. Or if you are looking in the mirror and you're just like, ugh, giving that grunt, or unhappy with putting clothes on, especially for, a lot of times with women, then guess what? The child's going to see that. And then they're going to be confused because you're telling them that they're beautiful, they're amazing, they can do anything, but yet they see you say something very different to yourselves. And when they see you, they think that you are amazing, that you're beautiful, and that you're perfect. So it sends a very confusing and conflicting message for the child to understand.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's really important that we model as parents, like healthy mental health.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the best and the biggest investment you can make is not in your financial wealth, it's not in your physical health, it's your mental health. It governs everything else. So what I say to parents, like, you don't have to wait until there's a crisis for you to start talking to your child about mental health.
Right.
Do it now. Do it when they're doing well.
Sure.
Know, because we don't want to wait until something bad happens for you to think, well, that's when you need help.
Right.
You can come to me whenever. Right? So giving
Sure.
them the permission to talk about their feelings and their thoughts and their attitudes and their beliefs, knowing that they're more than their body, right? And a lot of times I see parents like, well, I don't want my kids to, struggle with their food. Like, I want them to eat healthy. Okay. Well, the most, the food that people want the most is the one that's forbidden. Right. So if you tell me I can't eat bread, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to chow that stuff down. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there.
Sure.
So learning to have, just a relationship with food where it's not that food is more powerful than you. Like, you have power over the food. It's just bread at the end of the day.
Right.
It's just bread.
Sure.
Right. It's not going to kill you. So.
That's super interesting.
In terms of child development, because we've come across this a couple of times in the show, as we sit here 30 plus, right, a lot of our self-perception, the lens with which we view the world, is the aftermath of something that we experienced at 5 years old or earlier, right? What is the process to get somebody to identify that a lot of this shit that they're hanging on to or hung up on doesn't have anything to do with the here and now? It has everything to do with that really young, immature lack of wherewithal, perception of an experience that happened way back when.
Well, I think that's where therapy is such an important piece of everybody's life, right? Because that's what therapy is all about. Therapy is about understanding the past, learning from it, and then, kind of moving forward.
Yeah.
I think people are afraid of like, well, I don't want to talk about what happened in the past. And it's painful. Like, why would I want to talk about that? Well, what's happened because you haven't talked about it. Right? No one dies from feeling, but you know what we can die from? Avoiding our feelings. Right? Because we have drug abuse, alcohol abuse, shopping, gambling, sex addiction, eating disorders. Like, those are ways that people avoid talking about their feelings. So it is scary, and it brings up a lot of emotion. And so it's learning to have those, the skills to deal with the emotion, right? So mindfulness, distress tolerance. So something's really distressful to me. How do I tolerate that situation? Emotion regulation. So how to make sure my emotions don't go from a 0 to 100, helping the person navigate that. Like, well, maybe it's a 20, or then you go up to a 50 or a 60, and then come back down to a 40. And then interpersonal effectiveness. So how do I communicate my needs and my wants? So being able to give them the skills to say, okay, when we open up this trauma, we open up this event, you're going to have something to land on. You're going to have the ability to say, okay, this was about mom and dad, right? This wasn't about me. Because somewhere, somehow, someone communicated to you that, you were not worthy of love. Right? And that's where we get, there's something wrong with me. I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. Yeah. And so the feeling like you don't deserve is something I constantly see with individuals. Like, they feel like they don't deserve to talk about themselves or deserve to have a safe space to talk about their pain. And that's where I think therapy is really, really important.
Sure. You see that lack of deservedness, play out. We talk about success, whatever that looks like across the board.
Yes.
But people not, quote unquote, living up to their potential
Exactly.
because they don't feel like they deserve the notoriety, the success, or whatever, even though they've got all the skills, the credentials, the platform to crush it.
Yeah.
But they don't feel like they deserve
Exactly. I
that
see
stuff.
it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really common, more common than we really think. And really because they were told either directly or indirectly that they weren't deserving of it, whatever that it is, the success, the accolades, the praise, the compassion, the love. And so it's almost like this subconscious self-sabotage.
Sure. Yep.
So they hold themselves back. They don't get into the rooms. They don't get into the right in front of the people that they need to get into. And I was a victim of that myself. I mean,
Sure.
I mean, the reason I'm able to speak about it is because I was able to really do some personal development and, you know, these last couple of years and noticing like how I was even holding myself back, you know, and how was I keeping myself small?
Yeah.
And the moment that I gave myself the permission to be, you know, unapologetic and not worry about what other people were going to think of me. I mean, that's when everything took off.
What was the moment?
I went to a conference in Newport, and the theme was about permission. And so you had to give yourself permission to do something or permission for something. And so mine was permission to be unapologetic because I cared so much about making sure that other people were happy. And I wasn't so much a people pleaser, but if you told me like, hey, I need this done, I could get it done. You know, so I'd always take on and take on and take on. And I was just wearing myself thin.
Sure.
And it wasn't causing, you know, really bad problems in my marriage, but I wasn't showing up in a way that I needed to for my partner and as a wife and as a best friend to my husband. And so when I was at that conference, I mean, I just called him and I just cried.
Yeah.
And I just apologized. And he's like, what, you know, it's okay. I'm like, don't do that. Don't give me, no. Like you just allow me to own this, you know, stuff because you deserve more. We deserve more. Our kids deserve more.
Yeah.
And so the moment I did that, it was like, I just owned up. And so I think God was just ready for me to receive because I had been pushing him away for so long.
Yeah.
And so when I started opening up those conversations with God again and just being able to be in a place to receive love, I mean, you guys came to my life. I mean, so many people came into my life and I just feel like, okay, I mean, I just gave myself that opportunity because I gave myself the permission to believe in myself.
That's super interesting. From your standpoint, like when you're going through that process of uncovering those layers, like for me, for instance, like have you heard of David Goggins?
Yeah, I love him.
See, okay.
His podcast with Jay Shetty. Did you listen to that?
No, I haven't heard that one with Jay Shetty. Is it good?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I'm obsessed with Jay Shetty.
Okay.
He's one of my favorite podcasts. And they had this, the second one I listened to was David Goggins.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my gosh, who is this person? I'm sitting in the parking lot. I'm crying.
Oh, wow.
Listening to his story.
Yeah.
I immediately sent the podcast, I forwarded it to my husband. He bought his book.
Yeah.
Incredible man.
Yeah.
Incredible man.
It's a crazy good book, right?
Oh, so good.
So like, I know his approach is very on the other side of what people like in a way of sort of a destructive in if you take it too far, where you look yourself in the accountability mirror and you're like, you fucking suck today, right?
Yeah.
And like, so I really like that approach personally. Like I like that approach where I can look at myself and I'm like, Jeff, you just own your shit. You suck. Like, let's go and figure out the pieces the way.
Yeah.
But can that get overly destructive for instance? Like when does the nurture part come from? Like, cause more like the feminine side where like you have to say, I embrace, I love, and da-da-da. Cause I have a very hard time with like, oh, you're so great, Jeff. It's like, no, Jeff, you fucking suck, dude. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
You know? And like, to me that works. And I'm like, the nurture side hasn't really worked for me or I haven't embraced it enough. So I guess selfishly, how would you work through that? Because I like the hard stuff. I don't like the soft.
I don't know your background, but obviously with David Goggins, I mean, think about the voice that was in his head.
Right.
It was his father's. That was so abusive.
Right.
So humiliating and dehumanizing. So his approach might seem rough and hard compared to, you know, love. But compared to what he was getting,
right.
I mean, it's one end of the spectrum to the other, right? So I think it depends upon the person and the context.
Okay.
Because, I mean, if you grew up with somebody, like if you are in a home where everyone's speaking Russian, you're going to learn to speak Russian. So if he was in a home where he had one of the most abusive fathers, you know, belittling him every single breath that he took, you know, he's going to interpret that as his own self-talk, his own inner critic. And I think one of the things I teach the most when mastering self-love is just notice the inner critic. Notice who it is. Notice when it comes up. What does that feel like? And get curious about it. You know, like what sensations come up in my body when the critic comes up? Do I shut down, or do I use it as fuel? Does it motivate me, or do I stay in analysis paralysis? Does my heart race? Does my stomach hurt? Does it cause me to have inflammation in my body where I'm not able to digest my food? Understanding and getting curious, and then learning to be compassionate. Compassionate doesn't always have to be soft and lovey-dovey and super uber feminine. It can just mean giving yourself the grace to just be not as critical as the voice you heard growing up.
I like that a lot, because it's basically dependent on who you are as a person then.
Right.
Okay, I like that a lot.
Because I respond to tough love.
Yeah.
I call it care fronting. So in my approach with clients, I'm not going to always hold your hand. I'm going to call you out on your shit. And that's part of my job. To be that person, to hold that boundary for you, to recognize, when you are not holding yourself to the potential that I know you're capable of, but you need to believe that you are capable of. And so I think it depends upon each person. And so I also respond to, come on, get your stuff together.
Yeah.
Figure it out. You got this. And I love Marie Forleo. She's
great.
She has
She's
that
fantastic.
Everything's figure outable. And she's got a great podcast on Super Soul Sessions with Oprah about how everything is just figure outable. And I responded to that one, and that's another great way of looking at it.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I like that approach.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you hear experts, I call them, where they're like, don't go that hard on yourself. Be loving. And it's like, I like the hard stuff, and to me that's what works. For me personally. But
just
been trying to uncover some layers, and it's like, dude, does that shit really work?
Yeah. And I think too, if you have an athletic background, I know you guys obviously are athletes. So if you had a coach,
We still got it, bro.
Yeah, I know. I swear I watch arena football. I'm like, I could fucking be out there right now. God, what did I do in my life not to play football in this world?
That's awesome. It's so true. Oh, that's great. But, if you had a coach and they were, giving that tough love, that might be something you respond to because that's the arena, that's the language that you were listening to. And so that's motivating for you. So again, I think it just depends upon the person.
Yeah. I've never explored it that way. Going back to the voice associated with David Goggins' narrative, whose voice is it? Because it's not his.
No.
And based on the way that you preface that thing, that phenomenon, it's not our voice either.
No.
Whoever that self dialogue, even though it's ours of our creation, it's not our voice. I've never explored that before.
No,
Yeah.
super interesting.
I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. So you can take that.
Oh,
You can take that and dive into that. Yes.
So, when you were going through your evolution,
My transformation.
your transformation,
Yes.
whose voice was it?
Great question. I definitely my mom. My mom is a people pleaser. And she knows this about herself, and we all know this about her. And bless her heart, because she's so caring. But it was very made aware to me that as a female, and a lot of females get this message in either directly or indirectly, that our reason to live and to be here is to please others. Whether from an aesthetic perspective or from a serving perspective.
That's a totally different narrative than to care for.
Yes. Very different.
Not the same.
Not the same.
Okay.
Please is I forget myself and my attention's completely on you and meeting your needs. It creates this codependency.
Okay.
Caring for is, equal partnership. Right? So, I would get told, stay out of the limelight, be like the other girls, blend in, and I'm not meant to blend in.
Sure.
My personality doesn't blend in, I'm meant to stand out. And there's something really magical and amazing about that, because with my ability to stand out, then I want to help others feel like they can stand out too.
Yeah.
I want you to give yourself the permission to be awkward, to be too much, to be sexy, to be feminine, to be masculine, to be geeky, whatever it is, to allow yourself to have that permission, because we've all been in those rooms. Maybe it was the gaming conference you went to, and you saw that person that just looks like they have it all. And you're like, man, how do I do that? That confidence, that aura, that energy. And the thing is, that person's no different from you and I. The only difference that person did versus, us, is they just give themselves the permission not to care anymore about what you think. That's really what it boils down to.
Sure.
And so when we stop caring about what others think, then we don't worry about the judgment. We don't worry about the failure. and we just allow ourselves to be unapologetic. And for me, that's what it was about. Like, I had to be unapologetic and allow myself just to be in those rooms and not worry about people pleasing and making sure everyone was okay.
Yeah.
You know, and just be myself and allow myself just to shine.
So your catalyst was that Newport conference then?
It was, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of took me to the next level. I mean, it's definitely, you know, I've always kind of done that work, but I think it's the Bliss Tribe event with Lori Harder.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so after that, that's kind of when I just, and in, you know, reconnecting with God, I think obviously that was another really critical piece. Like, he's been pursuing me for so long.
Sure.
And, you know, we had a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
You know?
How many times, maybe you're aware, maybe you're not aware of it, but how many times did you hear that same message that you heard at Lori Harder's conference for it to finally stick to that point where it hit you in Newport? Like, I finally get it. Like, how many times do you even remember along that path, how many times you heard that message, but you weren't ready to accept it yet?
I don't know. And it's
Yeah.
I'm going to think about that one. I'm going to marinate in that because I don't have a clear answer for that. But I do know when I sabotaged myself. So there was an opportunity after the Powerhouse event, the big opportunity to grow myself and my business.
Just recently?
It was just recently last year.
Yeah.
And I turned it down. I said yes, but I said no. It was one of those, oh, yes, but,
Okay.
you know, and that's how I kept myself small.
Hesitancy on it.
Yeah. And so, and the person looked at me like, are you kidding? I mean, how could you pass this up? And I didn't understand it. And I just wasn't ready to receive.
Yeah.
And so then I went and did my personal development. And then I actually reached back out to her and I said, oh my gosh, this is how I kept myself from growing and limiting, you know, all my limiting beliefs were being really tested in that moment. And this is the work that I've done. And if you would still, you know, provide that opportunity, I would love to have it.
Yeah.
And she said, yes.
There you go.
That's awesome.
Do you believe in the power of yes?
Oh, yeah. I believe in the power of no. I also believe in the power of yes. I mean,
But,
yes.
But in terms of the self-sabotage thing, right? If you're aware enough to know that that's a thing,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of power that comes with saying yes anyway, right? Because I was just having this conversation yesterday. You know, the person I was talking to does not feel prepared at all for the things that are coming her way, right? And you know, when they're asking me like what to do, I'm like, just say yes. And they're like, but the how and, you know, all the logistics and the paralysis,
perfectionism of it all.
And it's like, you'll figure it out.
Yes,
like,
everything's figure outable.
because you have to.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In Grant Cardone's book, The 10X Rule, he talks about accepting this proposal. And, you know, if he had a cab ride in New York City to LaGuardia and a plane ride to Seattle or something like that to figure it out.
Yeah.
But because he said yes, he committed.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
In that 8-hour window, he figured it out and delivered exponentially.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And if it's important enough to frighten you, to scare you away from the opportunity, I feel, and everything that we've seen, experienced, and talked about on the show, through other people's example as well as our own, it's important enough to come through and excel.
Yeah, for sure. And as you both know, that's what growth is.
Yeah.
Growth is not easy. Growth is not comfortable. It's completely uncomfortable as all hell. You don't know what you're doing. You're scared. You question yourself. And welcome to growth.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's where we learn. That's the good stuff.
Sure.
You know, it's done is better than perfect. And that's something that I've really recognized because even with launching my body image course, like I was so afraid that it wasn't going to be perfect and it wasn't going to be enough. And I had filmed it and I recorded it and then I threw it all away and I walked away from it because it was like, it was too perfect. It looked too scripted. It wasn't real. It wasn't authentic. And I was like, you know what? Forget that. And I took a break and then I got back into who am I doing this for? Who is this geared to? And it's to the college girl like myself who was really struggling with insecurity and shame and just didn't feel like she was enough.
Yeah.
It's to the mom who's struggling with, you know, trying to manage her body after having children. It's for the guy in the gym who is still struggling with his masculinity because he feels like he's never going to be man enough. You know, it's for those people. And then that's when I went back, just completely did it raw and authentically. And that's when I knew.
Yeah.
Here we go. There it is.
So you're doing a lot of work
I am.
for a massive audience. What do you do every day for you?
Oh, such a good question. I pray. I got up and I did a jog today, which ended terrifyingly because there was 3 coyotes like crossing in front of me. I hug my children. I love up on them as much as I can. I think, you know, for me being a parent that, you know, works, and when I come home, like, it's all I want to do, just be with them.
Yeah.
I really make my weekends intentional to take time away. My new word, I just had my birthday on Sunday. So
happy belated.
Thanks guys. My new word is adventure. So I want to find adventure, whatever that looks like. Adventure in my marriage, adventure with my children, adventure in my career, adventure in my relationship with myself. So, I just try to find moments. I'd love to say that I give myself an hour a day, but I don't. It's maybe multiple times a day that can add up to an hour.
Sure.
And music's just always been my therapy. So if I can just put on a good song and just clear my head, because I hear a lot of trauma, you know, on a daily basis. So making sure that I'm taking care of myself is critical to my job to be a therapist.
So you don't wear it home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and that did happen early on when my husband and I first got married. Like, he'd come home and he'd want to talk about his day. And the last thing I want to do is listen. I mean, I've been listening to it all day long, you know, and I'm like, oh, okay. But then I was like, well, that's not fair to him. I'm not showing up as a wife to him. So I really had to go back in and say, okay, how can I make sure that whatever I hear, I leave there so I can just come back to it? And so that's what I would do. So when I close the door, I put on my music and I just unwind from the day.
What form of music resonates with you the most?
Everything.
Everything?
I could listen to... I love like a good Linkin Park song.
Okay.
All the way from to Beastie Boys.
Jeff wants you to say hip hop.
It doesn't bother me.
I mean, really any of it. I mean, I'm kind of right now digging, like, going back into the 90s a little bit.
Okay.
Listening to Lauryn Hill. She's
Digging
been Lauryn Hill's been my girl that I've been getting ready to in the morning, and this Zion, and that is just speaks to me. So
digging crates, I like it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Where can everybody in this community go support you and everything that you have going?
Really, I mean, social media, obviously, you know,
Okay.
I'm on Instagram, Dr. Morgan Francis, and
DR or spelled out?
Dr. MorganFrancis.
Beautiful.
I just launched my body image course, which I'm super proud of because, like I said, it's just so authentic and it's real.
Yeah.
And what was happening is so many people were like, oh, I really wish I could come see you, but I can't afford it, or I'm not in Arizona. And I want to make mental health more accessible. I mean, it really needs to be.
Sure.
So that's why I was like, you know what? I'm going to just have a course, and I'm not going to just launch it and then close it. I think a lot of people do that, which is fine. It's to everybody's own, you know, preference, but this is evergreen. It's there forever. So you can have it any time you want, and it can be done on your time frame. And the workbook comes with a workbook, and it's got like so many tools and tips and interventions and skills that you can do at home and practice and understand, so you can cultivate a healthy relationship so your body doesn't have to be a source of stress anymore.
Nice. And how can they access that course?
Just go right onto either Instagram and on the link tree right there, and the link in my bio, or just go to my website, www.scottsdalepremiercounseling.com.
Cool.
Yeah.
Dope. Well, appreciate your time, Jay. You're awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
It's really an honor.
Yeah, really
Thank you.
appreciate you making the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think our tribe will be massively benefited from this
Absolutely.
conversation.
Yay. Good. Anytime I can talk about mental health, I'd love to.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Until next time, guys, feed me, fuel me.